Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new National Party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.
Government pension. What are the facts? Are all public workers entitled to pension? Are public workers owed gratuity? Here are the facts. Fact 1. The Pension Disqualification Act of 1983 was validated on April 21, 1985 by the democratically elected government led by former Prime Minister Herbert A. Blaise. This means that public workers employed after February 22, 1985 are not legally entitled to a pension from the government of Grenada. Fact 2. The judgment in the Hermelin Armstrong case does not create legal precedents for the reinstatement of pension to public workers employed after February 22, 1985. The judgment created a legal precedence only for those workers who joined the public service in a pensionable post between April 4, 1983 and February 22, 1985. There were 56 such workers. The government restored pension to those 56 workers in 2018 at a cost of $7.7 million. Fact 3. All officers employed in a pensionable post who joined the service after February 22, 1985 are not legally entitled to a pension from government. They are only entitled to a pension from NIS once they meet the necessary requirements as per the NIS Act. Fact 4. The Cabinet's decision in 2016 to reform pension is rooted in moral and social justice principles, and it is not a legal obligation. Therefore, any agreement on pension is a win for public workers. Fact 5. The MOU signed between government, the unions, and staff associations in February and March 2018 stated that the pension regime which will be implemented must be affordable and sustainable. Fact 6. The proposed pension regime for public workers employed between February 22, 1985 and December 31, 2018, as stated in the MOU, is a non-contributory pension plan. Therefore, no deductions will be taken from workers' salaries to finance their pension from government. Pensioners also benefit from any future negotiated salary increases. Fact 7. It was agreed by all parties that a worker's annual pension would be a minimum of 70% of their final salary to be paid jointly by the NIS and the government of Grenada. Fact 8. Government is not obligated to offer an advanced pension payment, commonly called a gratuity. Government has proposed to make an advanced pension payment of 2% of full pension, an amount it can practically and reasonably afford given its current and projected revenue stream. It should be noted that an advanced pension payment is a non-interest-bearing loan that the government grants to the pensioner, which must then be repaid in equal monthly installments in the form of a reduced monthly pension over 12.5 years. Fact 9. Under the proposed 2% advanced pension payment or gratuity, retirees will be entitled to a higher monthly pension than if a larger advanced payment was given. Fact 10. If the government accommodates any higher rate of gratuity, the implications would be severe for the country, as this will translate to higher taxes such as VAT, income tax and property tax, higher import duties, the possibility that hundreds of millions of dollars in grants would be lost, lower expenditure in critical areas such as healthcare, agriculture, roadworks and youth development, retrenchment of workers. These are the facts. Government is committed to an amicable resolution to the pension matter for the good of all Grenadians.
Public sector trade unions agreed to return to the negotiating table. Details to this story and more in the National Report. With the details to the news for Monday, November 26th, I am Rikisha St. Louis. Public sector trade unions involved in the dispute with government over the advanced payment of pension have agreed to return to the negotiating table. That confirmation from Acting Labour Minister Honourable Anthony Boson. Invoking his powers under the Labour Relations Act, the Acting Labour Minister summoned a meeting of the disputing parties on Monday to discuss arbitration, and the meeting ended with an agreement to resume the pension talks. In a statement, Minister Boson said, and I quote, "I have been reliably informed by the leadership of the trade unions that all industrial action will cease and workers, in particular our teachers, will return to the classroom as of Tuesday, November 27th, unquote. Minister Boson used the opportunity to thank the leadership of the public sector trade unions for their understanding in this matter and for their recognition that the national interest and the interest of the nation's children supersede all other interests. Having just been appointed Acting Labour Minister in the absence of the substantive Minister of Labour, Honourable Peter David, he also thanked Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell for the confidence bestowed on him by asking him to serve in such a critical period. His statement ended by saying he is also gratified to have been of some assistance in getting public sector trade unions, and in particular the Grenada Union of Teachers, to cease all industrial action and to return to the bargaining table to seek a permanent solution to the current industrial dispute. Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell was due to travel to Washington this past weekend to attend a conference on building resilience to disaster and climate change in the Caribbean. He chose instead to stay at home, noting the current industrial climate. Minister for Climate Resilience, Senator Simon Steele, is representing Grenada at the Washington meeting. The Egyptian billionaire who has invested millions of dollars to construct a world-class hotel in the south of the island says politics must never be mixed with business. Sharia Noel spoke exclusively with Mr. Naguib Sawiris over the weekend. We get more in this report.
Egyptian billionaire Naguib Sawiris, investor and owner of Silver Sands Grenada, says it is not good for any country when politics come into play in decisions that are taken that can contribute to the positive growth and development of the economy. Mr. Naguib, who has invested more than $125 million in the first phase of the Silver Sands project in Grandans, made comments during an exclusive interview with the Government Information Service. The response came in light of the many negative comments that have surfaced with the construction of the Silver Sands Hotel and Villa.
Unfortunately, politics is not a good, it's not a way to, what I mean is in politics when people throw foreigners or investors into the political game, this is very nasty. Why? Because they're not being fair to their own country. Investors who are coming to provide jobs, to increase the income of everybody on the island, to attract more and make more recognition of Grenada. You know, some people don't know even where Grenada is. When you say you're Grenadian, they don't know where is Grenada. They think it's in Spain somewhere or in Pennsylvania. So when someone does that, and because you have something, a political agenda, and you want to throw on the other party some blame, so you use the investor as a scapegoat, that's very dangerous game.
Mr. Naguib, who has already purchased 2 other beachfront properties to develop, explains what he meant by saying involving politics at that level is a dangerous game.
I never break any laws. I go by the book like that. I defy anyone to find something here which is not lawful. I don't want that, and I don't agree to that. And if someone points out, someone said something about something we've done, which we built on the land we bought, was built like that. So it was actually built before we came. We didn't build it even, but they said it's wrong. I asked, they said it was wrong, but nobody did anything about it. I said, no, we don't have anything wrong here. We demolished it immediately, see? But what I mean is, my advice is for the opposition, you go to politics against each other the way you want, but keep us out of this. It's not good for the country, it's not good for the people. It will not do good. And the other point is me, I'm not scared by no one or nothing. If they attack me and like that, I will do 10 projects more.
The Egyptian billionaire says he could have invested in any other Caribbean island, but chose Grenada due to its peace, tranquility and warmth of its people. For the National Report, I am Sherry-Ann Noel.
This is the National Report. More news after the break.
Big business don't participate.
Welcome back. Government anticipates the Land Bank project will generate more revenue in 2019. The FAO-funded project allows for greater management of Crown lands and gives the government the opportunity to lease lands for agricultural production. From June to November 2018, $964,223 were collected from sale of lands. For that same period, $763,866 were collected from rent for leases. Minister for Agriculture and Lands, Honorable Sheldon Scott, during her contribution to the 2019 budget on Friday, said lands have been allotted in St. David and St. Mark as part of the project.
Cabinet has assigned 100,000 acres of lands in Diamond, St. Mark, and Grand Bacolet, St. Andrews. The ministry has committed a further $150,000 to support the operationalization of this land bank project. Mr. Speaker, the focus of the Land and Survey Division over the last few years has been to effectively and efficiently manage Crown lands. We have how much lands in Grenada again, you know. And if we don't manage these lands, Mr. Speaker, we're going to end up with no lands at all.
According to Minister Bain Hosford, once proper structures are in place, more revenue can be collected. She addressed the issue of squatting on government lands.
Stop the ad hoc occupation of government lands, which results in squatter settlement. People are squatting everywhere. We have to put a hold on that. And I speak to my colleagues all the time, because we are the ones that have to really brace that opportunity and make sure that we manage these well. Because people come to us for lands all the time. I sit in my office and every day, every Wednesday, 10, 14 people come for land. When you ask the question, oh, I want to break out of my house, I want to break out of my mother's house, you know, and these are things. We have to start planning how we're going to utilize the lands in our country. People cannot keep getting a house and a piece of land. We don't have lands. We may have to build condominiums, we have to build apartments and these sorts of things. We have to move in that direction. Our young people have to understand that.
And finally, Minister for Trade, Industry, Cooperatives and CARICOM Affairs, Honorable Oliver Joseph, says Grenada needs to find ways to reduce its huge trade deficit, which now stands at more than $1 billion. Making his contribution to the 2019 budget recently, Minister Joseph said more emphasis must be placed on local production as a means of closing the wide deficit.
Our total export in 2017 stood at 81.12 million. That's our total export. Total inputs. The inputs for 2017, Mr. Speaker, 1.13 billion. So we have a trade deficit of 1.05 billion.
Export figures for January to June 2018 stand at $46.16 billion, an increase in export of 9.1%. Minister Joseph says of main concern, however, is the country's food import bill.
Food import bill for 2017 was $211.29 million, approximately 19% of all our total imports. Poultry was the top of the list, $27.5 million in poultry. Now, Mr. Speaker, why Grenada can produce, even though we started first year with 10% of that, they 2.7 million out of the 27, and then the next year we go 10, and we become self-sufficient over the next 10 years. We are only 10% of our poultry needs that we produce, The next 90% we import. Poultry is the most widely consumed meat. Barbecue all over the place, and that's good, eat poultry, but the point I'm making is, why do we need to have a food import bill of $211.29 million in a country like Grenada, with a population of less than 110,000 people?
That story just brought the curtains down on the national report for today, Monday, November 26th. Let's recap the top story. Public sector trade unions agree to return to the negotiating table. On behalf of all those who made this newscast possible, I am Rikisha St. Louis saying thank you for joining us. Until next time.
Happening with the new national party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.
You're listening to Hard Talk Grenada via www.hardtalkgrenada.com.
I woke up in a special way this morning.
Yes, indeed, I did.
This morning.
Devon, did you?
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, indeed, man.
I don't know why I feel this way this morning, but something really touched my soul this morning. This morning.
Yes, folks, it is time for Hard Talk. My name is Sheldon Scott.
I'm Devon Romain.
And it is Hard Talk. We're live on 97.5 City Sound FM.
89.5 CRFM.
92.9. Yes, Sister Isle FM out there in Carriacou.
And out there in the cold, freezing Brooklyn, 94.9 We Vibes Radio.
Yes, indeed.
I just can't control. I don't know if it's real.
Straight off the bat this morning, we're going to go to the national address by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell. Going to play that for you in a short as soon as the technical operator says that he's ready to go. He said he's ready like Freddy. What's your middle name? Your middle name is not Freddy. What's your middle name again, boy? And I remember your middle name, and it's just slipping me right now, you know.
Ooh, Jacob.
Hey? Antonio. Yes, Antonio. Yeah. Nazim A. I don't call him. The other one is Nazim.
Nazim A. Benjamin.
He's Nazim.
Yeah, Nazim.
Nazim. Yeah, he's Nazim. Antonio Benjamin.
So it's Nazim V.
Not Nazim. Not Nazim. The other one is Nazim. He's Nazim.
Nazim.
Yeah, right. Yes, say it proper.
Nazim.
Yes. Folks, we're going to go to the national address by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell right about now.
The following is an address to the nation by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell on the current industrial relations climate.
Fellow Grenadian sisters and brothers, I want to talk to you about the future of our beloved country and about what defines us as a nation. I also want to talk about being reasonable and fair, and ensuring social justice for all. These are the things at the core of this ongoing debate about the advance payment of pensions. While I'm Prime Minister at this time, this issue is bigger than me. It is also bigger than the current leaders of the trade unions and staff associations involved in this impasse. But as leaders, the one thing we may have in common is that we all are from the working class backgrounds, with an appreciation of people's yearning for both empowerment and development. We may debate how we achieve this goal, but that debate must never degenerate into meanness, disingenuity, nor the need to score cheap populist points. This is not the long-term interests of this country. And in this debate also, we must not only listen to the people with the loudest voices, but crucially, the people with no voice at all. There is the young man who is still without a job, the single mother hoping for a chance to keep her dignity, the part-time worker with no security and no benefits, the now long retired elder whose economic circumstances has forced them into homes for the elderly. Ultimately, sisters and brothers, we'll be judged by the fight we fight for the least among us, those without the power or the confidence to champion their own worthy cause, those without the will or the connections to incite. For our nation would not be worthy to hang on to its soul if we do not take into consideration the most vulnerable among us, nor the interests of the generation to come in every decision that we make. Sisters and brothers, that's why, together as a people, we must have a discussion in the context of what is both reasonable and fair, and what is just for all the citizens of this beautiful country. And so, you may ask yourself, what is reasonable? 2 years ago, this government, through its own initiative, felt it was reasonable that public servants, like workers everywhere, should have a pension that can provide for their daily needs when they retire. It was a moral and philosophical position we took, understanding that the restoration and reformation of pension, as desirable as it is, was not necessarily an easy thing, and that it must be affordable and sustainable over the long term. For over 35 years, an entire generation ago, there was no pension for public servants except through the National Insurance Scheme, NIS. Sisters and brothers, successive governments failed to tackle this issue, not because any of them was insensitive to the cause, but because it was extremely difficult to do. Even the very trade unions that are now inflexible in their demands did not tackle this issue. Hubbard Blaze, Ben Jones, Nicholas Braffett, George Brazan, Tillman Thomas, and myself in previous terms all failed to get that job done. Let us fast forward to 2018. Government, fully cognizant that NIS alone is not sufficient to give public officers an affordable quality of life, entered into a memorandum of understanding with the public sector trade unions and staff associations to guarantee workers a pension of at least 70%, which is far more than what currently obtains. Sisters and brothers, this memorandum of understanding in principle ushered in the reformation of pensions, pending all final agreements achieved through negotiations. Fellow Grenadians, here is the truth. Government and trade unions have agreed on a formula which states that each public officer will retire with a pension that is not less than 70% of their last salary. The widely spewed narrative that government has somehow gone back on an understanding outlined in this MOU is certainly fake news generated by mischief makers. Government remains fully committed to ensuring that public officers receive a pension of at least 70% of their last salary. The outstanding issue about pension reform, and what is it at the heart of the current impasse, is whether and to what extent government can afford an upfront loan to retiring public officers. That is called an advance payment of pension, what is currently being referred to as gratuity. Whatever the size of that loan or advance payment that is agreed upon by government and the trade unions and staff associations, deductions will be taken out later from the monthly pension payments to repay that loan. Another fact to know, whatever the final loan size and the schedule for repayment at the end of the period, workers will receive all pensions due to them, which is, as we have agreed, is at least 70% of the last salary. Therefore, sisters and brothers, the suggestion that government's inability to give a 25% loan as an advance payment of pension means that workers will lose is totally false. Sisters and brothers, I assure you, government is committed to the pension arrangement and to pay the full agreed amount. Additionally, the suggestion that there is a law somewhere that dictates that government must pay 25% upfront as an advance pension payment or gratuity is absolutely false. In fact, If such a law exists now, the most appropriate course of action would be for the disputing parties to challenge it in a court of law. Here is another fact, sisters and brothers, that there was no breakdown in the negotiations on pension reform. In the negotiations which involve trade unions and staff associations, the Grenada Union of Teachers, GUT, unilaterally walked out on the bargaining process and prematurely called a strike without going through the accepted process of arbitration provided for in the Labor Relations Act. The action was both unfortunate and disappointing, and it spoke to the level of arbitrariness that quite frankly took a negotiating team by surprise. In the spirit of trade unionism, other unions decided to stand in solidarity with GUT. Through all of this, government has consistently voiced a willingness to reopen dialogue, and in every instance we have offered to do so unconditionally. On the other hand, some representing the trade unions have consistently shown that they're more wired for war than a peaceful settlement. The discussions on Friday, November 23rd were a case in point. Some proposals were put on the table. The government's negotiating team stated that a response will be provided Monday after Cabinet has had an opportunity to review. Mere hours later, one union declared 3 more days of strike. Sisters and brothers, this did not show good faith, a premise on which negotiations are conducted. We admire and understand the role of trade unions and the desire to fight for the members. Rightfully, that's their mandate as a bargaining agent representing their membership. Sisters and brothers, this right brings with it a serious responsibility. A responsibility of leaders to lead on issues that confront members in openness, truthfulness, and genuineness in regard to the objective facts and realities. That said, unions must be in turn appreciate that government has a broader mandate, which is to fight to protect all workers, those who are represented by trade unions and those who are not government, but also fight to protect the weak and vulnerable. In short, government must provide social justice for all, not only a select group of persons. There is one national pie, and it is government's duty to share that pie among all its citizens, not just those who work in the public service. Sisters and brothers, government cannot accede to the demands of the 25% gratuity in the current construct, because it means that we'll have to find an average about $21 million annually for what is, in effect, a loan to public sector workers who have been employed in the period post February 22nd, 1985 and December 31st, 2018. Sisters and brothers, it must be noted that the figure of $21 million does not include what will have to be allocated for the so-called unestablished workers who are not confirmed to an established position. Now, when we come to negotiate for these other workers, that figure would balloon into an even larger amount, which will further undermine government's ability to pay, bearing in mind that there are many others depending on us for social justice. Understanding all of this, it brings us to the point of what is fair. Government position is that it is neither reasonable nor fair to make such a demand for a huge loan upfront and to be also inflexible with it, knowing that such a payment could lead to possible job losses, cuts in services, or imposition of new taxes, impacts that will inevitably reach the wider population. None of these scenarios will benefit anyone and contravenes government's commitment to provide social justice for all, including the public officers who will get an advance pension payment, only to have it snatched from them through the fiscal measures that will become necessary to support the very payment. But sisters and brothers, there's an even greater repercussion. Such a huge payment at this time will put government in breach of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. It will stop us from getting an almost $100 million from the international agencies to invest in our country and its people, which is supposed to come very soon. It would also throw all the sacrifices made by all Grenadians in the last few years down the drain. It will plunge the country into economic crisis. It will create hardships for the people seeking housing assistance, part-time jobs on the roads, assistance with tuition and other academic expenses, the Amani trainees, people who depend on social services, including our elders who have served their country well. Sisters and brothers, how can that be socially just? Government will be grossly irresponsible if it accedes to such a request, which will create more problems with more negative, long-standing effects. My dear sisters and brothers, that is why we appeal to people's collective sense of reasonableness and fairness, to a sense of patriotism from the trade union leaders, who have every right to fight for their members, but must not forget the parents of the children they teach, their friends in the community they play ball with, and their old grand aunt. If anything, Grenada's history has taught us that manufactured strife, fueled by an unwillingness to compromise, always hurts the weakest among us and sets us all back. Trade unions must be aware that they are not dealing with a dispute concerning employees in the private sector. The workers who they are bringing out to strike are teachers, nurses, caregivers, and persons who provide various government services. These people do not work to provide a profit to the employer. These people work to ensure that greater public good is enhanced. They give their services so that everyone, especially the children, will be protected and their interests promoted to ensure a better future. Trade unions, therefore, must act responsibly. They must bear in mind that the invaluable services these people perform and who they benefit from these important services. Therefore, sisters and brothers, when it's come to the public service workers, there has to be a different threshold which must be crossed before trade unions call for such drastic action to be taken. A responsible trade union must employ every dispute resolution mechanism available before taking strike action. It must be prepared to engage in a responsible and flexible manner. We sincerely hope that the trade unions will see the good sense of this approach in the interest of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Government is therefore committed to protecting the public interest, to have our hospitals functioning so that health care can be provided and the lives may be protected and saved. We are committed to ensuring that schools resume normalcy and that education of our children is not jeopardized. We are committed to the public service resuming normalcy, and we are committed to working towards securing the future of all Grenadians, Carriaconians, and Petite Martinicans. There are mechanisms available for the resolution of the present dispute. The trade unions have stayed away from that, preferring to hold the children and the people of this country hostage, with ransom being an unaffordable and unsustainable loan or advance payments of pension. This action cannot be reasonable and it cannot be fair. Government's many efforts have been rebuffed in the last 2 weeks with increasing belligerence. Government has continuously expressed a desire to resolve the impasse, a willingness to renegotiate at the bargaining table, but there must be a similar willingness by the trade unions to return to the table they walked out on and find a solution in the best interest of all Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Sisters and brothers, it is easy to sound the bells of war, where we must answer to a higher calling, to sing the songs of peace, to safeguard the interests of the nation's children. Would we have to set aside pension reform altogether? We genuinely see a need for reform, but it cannot be at the expense of the country's progress or at the expense of our children's education. As it stands now, the nation's children have lost 2 weeks of classroom time in which they would have to have valuable instruction from the teachers. Time lost can never be regained. But sisters and brothers, if this industrial action continues, government is proposing to have learning centers established across the country to provide this critical face-to-face instruction time for students, the future of our country. Furthermore, sisters and brothers, my cabinet colleagues and I, most of whom are former teachers, have all agreed that we'll visit these centers to teach our students. Sisters and brothers, as a former professor of mathematics, I'm prepared to teach mathematics to our children. Minister Gregory Bowen will teach mathematics and physics. Minister Oliver Joseph will teach economics. Minister Pamela Moses is a former English teacher, and she's willing to teach again. Minister Kate Lewis spent more than 17 years teaching. She's prepared to teach the principles of business, accounts, and office administration again. Minister Kendra Maturin-Stitt taught history, social studies, and English literature. She's prepared to teach the children of Carriacou again. Minister Clarice Mordes-Cohen taught English and science. Minister Emmeline Pear and Minister Delma Thomas taught at the primary level, and they too are ready and willing to teach again. Cabinet members who are not teachers are also prepared to assist in these learning centers to ensure that the interests of our students are well served. We are all prepared to sacrifice our time because we simply cannot allow our children to lose any further. Their future is at stake. The future of this country is at stake. We all must listen to the voices of reason that are out there. The leaders of civil society, the business community, and our religious leaders. Sisters and brothers, despite the existing tension in this industrial climate, as Prime Minister, I remain optimistic about the future of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. I'm filled with renewed hope for this beautiful country, as the vast majority of Grenadians have resisted rancor and applied reason. This hope is based on the public officers who continue to dutifully show up for work, the medical professionals who have refused to compromise the care of citizens and visitors alike, the teachers who continue to help students, many of them preparing for examinations, the parents and students who rejected outside agitation. We particularly salute the increasing number of teachers who showed up to work today and who are, by their own actions, signaling to the union leaders to return to good faith negotiations. On behalf of the government and people of this country, and those with smaller voices, and those with no voice at all, we are grateful. As a government, we are committed to the workers' cause. We won't avoid taking difficult decisions, but we promise to be reasonable and fair. That's the least we can promise to you. And this is the only thing we'll ask of all concerned. May God bless you, and may God bless this beautiful nation of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Thank you.
The preceding was an address to the nation by Prime Minister Dr. The Right Honourable Keith Mitchell on the current industrial relations climate.
Yes, indeed, and that was a national address by Prime Minister Dr. The Right Honourable Keith Mitchell on the present industrial climate, what is taking place in Grenada at this point in time. Yes, Devon, you've heard the address yourself. Your impressions?
Well, what I looking at the Prime Minister and his delivery, very calm and straight to the point. He makes no matters as to where the country is at now, what the country can withstand, and everything like that. And he made a passionate appeal to all those involved, and so that, look, we need to get this thing out of the way. We need to negotiate, and we need to, put Grenada first. So all in all, I think he made a delivery that you haven't seen the Prime Minister, like that in a long time. Very calm, and so statesman, much more statesman-like.
I'm wondering, because there seems to be much ado about nothing about the Prime Minister speaking about setting up some centers around the island. Now, it's the responsibility of government to ensure that systems are in place for the continued education of our children.
Of course.
For me, it is applaudable that you would have government ministers and the Prime Minister himself willing and able, let me say that again, not just willing, but willing and able to provide the service as teachers to the nation if necessary.
Yep.
Yeah, to me, it is applaudable. The Prime Minister taught at Howard University as a professor for many years. Yeah, he could teach mathematics. Honorable Gregory Bowen, he's an engineer by profession and so on. He could teach math, he could teach physics and so on. You have the Honorable Emlyn Pear, who has also been a teacher. Honorable Kate Skeeter-Lewis, who has been a teacher. Honorable Pamela Moses, who has been a teacher, principal.
I think almost 14 or 13 of them who were teachers.
Nearly everybody. Yeah.
Except he said for the Minister of Health have not had the opportunity of teaching in school.
And not because he hasn't had the opportunity of teaching. He's a former island scholar.
Of course.
So don't think he's a dunce person. He's a former island scholar who would definitely have the ability to teach because he's university educated as well. So it is a situation where you have those who have been teachers, those who have not been teachers. Honorable Delma Thomas was a teacher at a point in time as well. So you have all of them. And, or, I could teach too,
Yeah.
I can teach English literature, English language, physics, and chemistry.
But I think
social
the
studies
message,
and geography, history as well.
The message the Prime Minister really wanted to relay, in my view, when he spoke of that, is that, look, we will go the extra mile to ensure that our children is being taken care of, even if us as leaders have to come down to the different centers, different schools, and help, right?
I'm still trying to find out, though, because I've been listening to the comments and the statements online, and I'm still trying to figure out where's the humor in this. This is a serious issue.
Very serious.
We're speaking about the education of our children. We're speaking about putting systems in place for the education of our children. Where's the humor? Where's the joke in the whole thing? Fidel Castro used to put on the overalls, take his cutlass, put on the big sombrero. I don't call it sombrero in Cuba. They have a different name for it, Devon. You might know, but I have a different name. But he put on a big hat, and he used to go and cut cane, isn't it?
Exactly.
Lead
With
by
the farmers.
example.
Yeah.
Both him, Che, the entire cabinet at that time used to go and make sure that they cut in cane. And everybody used to go and cut cane because they understood the importance of that during the time of the Cuban Revolution. If you you also look at Thomas Sankara, and Thomas Sankara, what's the name of that country again? It used to be Upper Volta, Burkina Faso, the land of upright people. Yeah. He used to make sure that he went out into the community, and even if it's an irrigation project and he had to take a hoe and go and dig, or if he had to help drag the pipes to connect it, and so as the president of the country, to drag the pipes to make sure that the poor people could get water, he did it. What's the laughing matter here? What's the joke? Our children education become a joke now?
Leaders of the revolution during 79-83 used to get out there and be part of the CPE program, teaching not just students but persons who wanted and were willing to accept an education.
They want me pull some video of President of the Senate, Senator Chester Humphrey teaching class.
Exactly.
Well, if he don't have it, I have video of him teaching classes in 19 no long, during the period of the revolution.
Humphrey, all that. Morris Bishop at one point in time, Bernard Code, Eunice Whiteman, Einstein, not Einstein, but George Louison, Kenrick Radix. They used to make it and give back. Once or twice a week, they will show up in a center, in a particular community center.
I'm trying to figure out what's the joke here.
It's not
You're
a joking
talking about
matter.
the education of our children. Your cabinet has done something which has been done in other countries, as we pointed out. It's been done in Burkina Faso, it's been done in Cuba, it's been done even here in Grenada before. And we're saying that our children have been put into a situation which is untenable. We cannot continue that way. We cannot continue in a way where teachers are on strike and children have to remain home. You have people that have their CXC exams that they got to write. You have people that are preparing for their CPE exams and so, their CSEC exams. So people are preparing for their various exams and they cannot be at home, sitting, doing nothing. And here it is that a system is being offered that would be able to address that issue. And on top of that, we've also had that discussion yesterday where we said, in 10, 15 years from now, what has been discussed is what you're going to be seeing happening is that your child will not be leaving home. They will be there. A teacher will be in one location. So instead of having to have 10 or 50, let's say on the island, you have 50 physics teachers, you may only have to have 2 or 1 or 5. So that what the union should be looking at is how does technology and the changes that are taking place in education, how is that going to affect the profession and how is it going to affect the numbers? Because a union that might have thousands of members now might end up being a union with a couple hundred members a few years from now.
Maybe under 100 too.
Yeah, because of technology. And that is what needs to be considered because you could even end up with a regional thing, that you have the Center for Physics is this island and the Center for English is this island, Center for Spanish is this island. And the teachers come on via video conference and teach. Yeah? So that is what can happen. So when I see people, it shows a lack of understanding, a lack of a thought process, so that the first thing that comes to mind when you don't understand something and you're embarrassed by it is to laugh or try and make a joke out of it or think that it's something funny or it's not something serious because there's a lack of a thought process by the individual listening. If they are listening to what is being said and really hearing it, there's a difference between listening and hearing. Parents always used to tell me that as a child. There's a difference between listening and hearing. You could listen without hearing. Because a lot of people listened, but they did not hear. They didn't hear the Prime Minister speak, and so many of them has focused so much on that particular issue that they didn't hear the Prime Minister speak about the necessity to address all those other persons who don't have the money to call a radio program and talk and put forward their view, who don't have an internet account or access to the internet or ability to use the internet, but they have to benefit from whatever is being done by the state of Grenada. They cannot be disenfranchised. Somebody has to speak for them. Somebody has to take them into consideration, which is what the government is doing. You think the 4 and the 5-year-olds and the 6-year-olds generally, you think they have Facebook accounts and could go there and argue a case? No.
No, they can't.
And there are thousands of them. What about the 80-something-year-olds and the 70-something years old and even the 60-something-year-olds who are in some of the homes around the island? You think they're on Facebook? But things are going to affect them. If the economy is crippled, those who have the least are the ones that are going to feel the most pressure.
Exactly.
It always happens that way. Those with the least are the ones that are going to feel the most pressure. The Prime Minister spoke about that. But no, they didn't hear about that. They didn't hear him speak and say that all the 25% at this time.
At this time. They didn't hear.
Not that you ain't go get it. Yeah. Not that you ain't go get it at all. But that the economy cannot absorb it at this time. They ain't hearing those messages. Selective hearing. They're listening, but they have selective hearing.
But then again, Sheldon, the whole question of unity, they do not want to see the country of Grenada remain united. They understand that, look, government will do what it takes to ensure, the stability of the country, but they don't want that. We have the unions and government going back to the negotiating table, and there are those out there who are vexed, they are fuming because that is happening, because they want to see this unity and confusion in our country. But that will not happen, right? That will never happen.
Indeed.
It's just, we just have to focus on what is important, right? What is important? We need to focus and get it done. I'm proud. I'm glad that the teachers and government has decided to get back to the negotiating table, especially the teachers who have refused, up to yesterday, not to go back to the negotiating table, right? And it has been affecting the country and thus our children. Hate to see walking the road on school days and you have children with their parents on the side of the road walking, right? Or tagging along in the buses to go to the different parents' workplace. And so that's intolerable. That's abuse in my view. But hey,
we have a call.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Devon. Good morning, Sheldon.
Good morning to you, my friend.
Sir. Yeah, man. I just called in because this thing is so worrisome. When we go through those things already, Devon,
yeah.
And then, like history repeating itself,
Yeah, but you know what? Let's hope that it wouldn't reach that way.
Yeah,
and
because
good sense
what
will
I'm
prevail.
saying, if it's a union, man, when you read, you have knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? So the union and everybody's supposed to read what is there and understand it. But what I'm getting, if they don't understand what they read, you understand? Sit down around the negotiating table, talk about it. But at the end, we all have to come out with something.
Yep.
You can get a big and bold, as Peter David will say. You beat your chest. I'm the mighty this and I'm the mighty that, and the government's so wicked. You understand? And deep down, inside, they can't give $200 if they only have 100. And if they have 100, they cannot give away the 100. That's common sense. So why you're fighting? And what you're asking for is not your pension, I want money now. I want some money now. The government, by Sheldon, I don't even know where we come up with this thing. Whoever wrote this thing in Constitution or whatever they did. In Canada, America, you don't get those things. A poor country like Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, where this thing come from? you work, when time for pension, you get your pension. In Grenada, we have something, you could take all the money and then you go pay it back. We don't have money for that. We do not have the money for these things. So why we put ourselves into this box? When you finish work, and the time come you return, you say 60 years, 55 years, whatever, you try to get your pension. Why we are saying now, give people money now? When is it going to end? The minute time you open that door, they say, boy, when the lion is asleep, don't wake that lion up. And somehow, I still blaming the government. They still wake this lion up because that's the only chance they had to attack the government. We saw it in the past, Devon.
Yep.
We couldn't beat Gary by the poll. We got to the poll, the last thing was 9-6. And the only chance we had is to try something else. Because when we go to the people, we could not have won.
Nope.
And I see the same thing happening again.
Well, we have the solution.
Listen to the voice of the people. I hope LLM listening to that, they backtrack now because they realize some of the teachers decide, but you see me, this thing getting too hot now. This thing ain't look as about money now. It look as something else. So that's why this morning they decide to come and sit down. You understand? But if the teachers and them they stir up yesterday and don't come out, they'd have never come to the table. So the power is in the hands of the teachers and the nurses, etc. You understand? So I hope the teachers and them thinking smart. And don't let nobody blindfold you. Right?
All right, my brother.
Nobody blindfold you. Anyhow, guys, have a good one. I'm listening.
You too, my friend. Have a wonderful day.
Yes, indeed. And I know a caller is trying to get through. Let me see if I could play a little piece of tune here. And let me see if I could find that particular person.
Those whose courage shine much brighter than the sun, and they will be remembered by the works that they have done. Great men who fanned the flames of hope that burn throughout the years, and for that cause they gave blood, sweat, and tears. Real tears. There's Butler, Martin Luther, King Shaka, Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, TMR.
And we have a caller online with us. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Sheldon. How you do? How are your listeners this morning?
Well, they're doing well,
Glad to know. Praise
Good morning, Miss Pierre.
Devon is telling you good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Who is that? Devon, how you do? I'm hearing you very
low.
Very low. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we know the system tends to do that. But folks, we're speaking with the Honorable Minister of Education, the Honorable Emlyn Pear. And yes, Minister Pear, and how have things been going thus far for the morning?
well, busy as always, doing what you have to do.
Yes.
And you always give the best you can.
Okay. Well, I hear you're preparing to teach.
I do that every day, every single day. Ask my children, they'll explain that.
Yeah, because I realize some people are making humor out of a very serious matter that we're speaking about here. We're speaking about the education of our children by whatever means necessary. And this is a serious issue. This is not a joke issue. This is not a humorous issue. This is not a funny issue. This is the education of our children. And when Prime Minister spoke of the centers and so, in the speech last night, I think some people took it as some kind of joke, not realizing this is a serious issue.
Well, Sheldon, I'll be honest in saying I did not get to listen the address, but I read the text of the said address. And I had just a couple minutes ago the opportunity to explain to someone what I believe I know for a fact that the Prime Minister was alluding to. And, maybe in all fairness to persons who are listening, if they heard the address and probably does not know the context of what was said in relation to what you're speaking of, maybe there's room for misunderstanding. I probably want to be a bit fair, and I'm speaking about those people who are genuine now. If you're a politician and you just have a natural way of spinning everything and making politics out of it, I'm not referring to those persons. I'm speaking about those persons who listen and somehow were left with the impression that the Prime Minister may have meant that 15 MPs are going to man centers throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. There may be a couple genuine people out there who might be thinking that. And so I want to just give a little bit of background to show that what the Prime Minister meant by what he said was absolutely something totally different. Now, during my budget presentation, when I made the point as it relates to substitute teachers, that did not just fall from the sky. It came out of previous discussions that we had as a cabinet, concerns raised as it relates to our students who are at home, those who have exams coming up, and those who might not be supervised in any way and may be getting themselves involved in things that we would wish that they don't get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, out of that discussion, I raised the point that the union and the government has already agreed on moving forward with establishing a pool of substitute teachers. That discussion, that agreement came not out of the current situation, but it came out of a situation that would have left students unattended to. And those could be cases of a teacher going off on study leave, a teacher going off on maternity leave, a teacher going off on sick leave, or maybe a teacher just not showing up, maybe. Now, the discussion did not include teachers rightfully withdrawing their labor. I would have indicated that we must now bring that into the conversation, because if this situation continues and the way it's going, you can't tell for how long it would go on like it's going. So you're basically placed in a situation where you say, option one, I'm going to just sit patiently and wait and anticipate that one day this will end. Or option two, that you patiently hoping that this will end soon, but at the same time, you proactively doing something to engage the children positively. And option two is what I would have presented, what we would have discussed, and that was where that statement came from in the budget. That when we have that pool of substitute teachers, we also keep in mind situations like these where we want to think about the children and to be able to do something temporary for the children. Now, I'm talking about persons who are unemployed, and they would have been selected as substitute teachers. So a teacher goes off for 3 months on maternity leave, and you're called to go to school A and to serve as a teacher there for the 3 months. At the end of your stint, a teacher in school Y goes on 3 months maternity leave and you move to school Y. You finish those 3 months and a teacher in school Z is on 2 months sick leave, getting medical attention, and you move to school Z. That is how we anticipate that system would work. Now, currently, the way the system is designed, you do not have relief for some teachers in a lot of cases when they go off in certain situations. So coming out of that discussion on the budget on Friday, Saturday morning, Prime Minister would have called an emergency meeting, sort of a subcommittee of the cabinet. And again, members were expressing their concern Yes, we understand that there's a strike on. Yes, we understand that the union is making demands. Yes, we understand that we want them to go back to the negotiating table. Yes, we're hoping that they will. But what about the children? That discussion prolonged, and then it was decided upon after the discussion ended. One, that the Ministry of Education is to submit, and this is Saturday morning, is to submit to Cabinet on Monday morning a plan with recommendations as to how we are going to engage our students. Now, following that instruction given on Saturday morning, by then, about 10 o'clock, I immediately contacted the officers within the ministry and the permanent secretary. Officers, as in district officers, were given then a mandate that over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, that they should work on their district, preparing a plan for the establishment of clusters within their district. So, for example, if GBSS is one of the schools selected, then it means that if we are going with the option of engaging Form 5 students within that district in St. George's, that these Form 5 students who are not engaged, because let us remember there are teachers who are going out to their schools and they are having classes with their Form 5 students and in some cases other classes. So in a case where that is not happening in a school, parents would be asked to send these students to that particular school where the ministry would now engage retired teachers and other qualified persons to provide support to these students. And mind you, as I said to my team when we met again after Cabinet on Monday, I'm talking about the ministry team, the permanent secretary and the Deputy Chief Education Officer, I said to them, look, the objective of this must not just be about passing an exam, but quite frankly, I am more concerned about positive engagement, because I know for a fact that it still stands that idle hands are the devil workshop. Now, it means, therefore, that in addition to achieving the objective of assisting this child to prepare for an upcoming exam, we would also be positively engaging that child, which means he has less time to be involved in any other thing that is undesirable. Sheldon, I have to commend my officers because by Sunday night, I would have had a plan from every district identifying all the schools identified as possible cluster points and details inclusive of the number of students that would possibly need that kind of support and other details. And so I would have reported based on that to the Cabinet on Monday. Prime Minister is very strongly of the view that while we understand all that is happening as it relates to the industrial climate, we must keep at the center of our minds, at the center of the conversation, our children who are at home. And so he went on to say that every parliamentarian, every member of cabinet, every MP who has had a teaching background must ensure that they offer whatever support that they can, even if it means actually teaching a class at a center in their constituency. Now, this never meant that an MP is going to abandon their role as an MP or abandon their role as a minister of government to go to sit all day in a center. Now, I did this before. In visiting a school, I would have engaged students in a classroom setting and would have actually presented as it relates to a particular subject matter. I did this before in visiting the school. And so in that context, Prime Minister indicated to us that we must ensure that we give full support to the centers within our constituency. We were also asked to identify retired teachers or persons who qualify to be engaged as teachers in those centers. The district officers were asked to do the same thing, to identify persons. As a matter of fact, almost every proposal that I've received thus far, draft proposals, has the district education officer as the overall coordinator of those centers. So to interpret that to mean that 15 ministers were going to man and operate centers around Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, I want to say that I leave room for those persons who genuinely did not understand, and to say that this is exactly where this came from, and it's a concept I fully support. I can't see how, as a former teacher, that I would have Tom Jones, and I've had persons call me and say, Minister, I'm prepared to volunteer, even if the government decides that they're going to pay a stipend to these persons. I want to say up front, that I am prepared to give this as a service to my community. And whenever the plan is finalized, I am quite prepared to offer my service free of charge, and I'm willing to support a center if it's in this location. Now, if people are prepared to volunteer to do same, for example, I do my